سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولله الحمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن عليًا ولي الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن عليًا حجة الله. اللهم صل على محمد. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى. نحمده ونستعينه ونثني عليه ونؤمن به، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف بريته ومبلغ رسالاته العبد المؤيد الرسول المسدد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. عباد Allah, أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We begin this first Friday khutbah by reminding all of you and myself to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll continue our discussion on the chapter of Al-Jadal and Mira, arguing and going back and forth. And this is, of course, from the chapters of the book 40 Hadith of Ayatollah Khomeini. We reached this point in our discussion where we said that many times the reason why the discussions that are supposed to be very short, with the permission of our dear shuyukh who are here, The reason why these discussions are very short, or should be very short, but in reality they tend to turn into a 2-hour long argument. At the very core of it and deep down, there is an arrogance that is at play. And because that arrogance is there, this person is not willing to accept what he knows already to be right or wrong. So he's willing to argue back and forth over and over again, because the pain that he feels he has to go through if he were to admit that he was wrong from the beginning of this discussion is too much for him. And the Quran tells the Prophet that, Ya Rasulullah, if you find people yujadiluna fi ayatillah, they do jadal, there's rhetoric, they just want to go back and forth, they always have something to respond to you with. If you find that, this is because in fi sudurihim illa kibrun, because in their hearts there is an arrogance that lies. That arrogance that they have doesn't allow them to accept the truth from you. And so we went through a number of narrations and verses of the Quran that taught us that as opposed to doing jadal with people, we are to do what we refer to as mudarat. Mudarat literally meaning getting along with people, yes? Not taking things to heart too much. Someone says something, someone does something, you can overreact, you can take it personally, you can make a big deal out of it. Mudarat means you get along with this person. And we said this is one of the keys to having a happy life. So I want to start by narrating this tradition from the 6th Imam, who is narrating from the Prophet Muhammad salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhi. And we've touched on this before, that the 6th Imam, when he narrates from the Prophet, he doesn't quote a chain of narrations. And this is something unusual, because normally if you're quoting from someone who lived maybe 100 years before you, you would say, I heard this from this person, who heard this from this person, who heard this from this person. But the 6th Imam sits there and he says, Qala qala Rasulullah, the Prophet said this. Well, you weren't around when the Prophet was alive, yes? You weren't Sahabi of the Prophets. It's one thing for the 2nd Imam or the 3rd Imam to say the Prophet said this. Well, they were around, yes? But the 6th Imam wasn't around. Even the 5th Imam wasn't around. So how are they saying Qala Rasulullah? Yes, this is a discussion for another time. But the companions of the Imams, one of the ways that they used to identify the Imam of their time was this. That when the previous Imam would pass away, they would go looking for the one who quotes from the Prophet without a chain of narrators. Because if a person is quoting without a chain of narrators, number one, and number two, what he's saying, there's substance to it. He's not just saying anything off the top of his mind. Clearly, this knowledge is coming from somewhere else. So he wasn't alive during that time. And if you're not alive during that time, you should be quoting from other people. So the companion of the Imam, in some of the narrations, he says, when this Imam passed away, I went looking to see who else is there who will quote from the Prophet without quoting a chain of narrators. And I thought we lost this chain. That's it. This person, this Imam who passed away, is the last person who would quote without a chain of narrators, until I came across his son, and I saw, no, he also quotes the Prophet without a chain of narrators. And I knew this is something special happening here. Nonetheless, the 6th Imam quotes, he says, the Prophet said, Mudaratun nas nisful iman. Learning to get along with people is half of faith. Half of faith. وَالرِّفْقُ بِهِمْ نِصْفُ الْعَيْشِ. And being kind with them. And being merciful towards them. Yes? And compassionate towards them. نِصْفُ الْعَيْشِ. Half of your happiness in life is going to come from what? Learning to compromise with people. Not having too much of high expectations of people. You know, when you go into a group of friends, you always see this. In a group of friends, everyone has their own attitude. Everyone has their own tendencies. This person is like this a little bit more. You're like that a little bit more. Everyone has their own. You have to get along. You have to learn to say, okay, they have shortcomings. I have shortcomings too. As long as they're not going to betray me and they have some foundational traits, this is a friendship that I have to make it work. I have to be kind and compassionate towards other people. So if this mirah makes its way into my life, this is the main point of our first khutbah, what are the problems that it will create? The narrations tell us more about this. This narration is from the 6th Imam. Now he is quoting the 1st Imam. He says, قال أمير المؤمنين. Well, he wasn't around when Amir al-Mu'mineen was alive either. But that's a discussion for another time. قال أمير المؤمنين. He says, علي ibn Abi Talib, صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. اللهم صل على محمد. He said, إياكم والمراء. Stay away from mira. Stay away from the arguments. والخصومة. فإنهما يمرضان القلوب على الإخوان وينبت عليهما النفاق. Because when you get into that shouting match, yes, you might be shouting, you might be saying some words, but in reality, this is polluting your heart. Your heart is getting polluted. Your heart is getting altered from its natural states. Yes, يمرضان القلوب. It, sickens the heart. And the author starts to explain, how is it possible that I just say some words and then my heart is sickened by these words that I said? He said, this is the reality of the deeds that you do and the effects that it has on the soul. It's a very interesting correlation that, for example, if I walk into a place that I wasn't supposed to walk into, all of a sudden my heart is polluted. If I look at something that I wasn't supposed to look at, all of a sudden my heart is polluted. He says this is the nature of how deeds impact the heart of the human being. And he says sometimes there are deeds that seem very small in their immorality. They don't seem like a big deal. You're not killing anyone, God forbid, yes. You're not stealing anything from anybody. But he says that small deed can have تأثير كبير على الروح. It can have a very big impact on your soul. Yes, I always give this example. If you were to ask someone what is an immoral deed, they'll give you these examples, right? And these are all true. Yes, taking the life of another person, violating the rights of another, all of this. Now you come to Islam, Islam will tell you, if someone comes to you and says salam to you, and you don't say salam back to them, this is a sin, it's worthy of punishment, it's this, it's that. But just because I didn't say a word back, this is the nature of these deeds that Islam is shedding light on. Yes, Islam is saying that one word that you were supposed to say had such an impact, you didn't say it, your heart is polluted now. This person came and showed kindness to you, you didn't do it in response to them. So your heart is polluted now. These are things normally we wouldn't understand. But Quran and Hadith is shedding light on it. That this deed, though it seems harmless to you, it carries a very problematic aspect to it. This is part of a longer discussion. Today, especially our younger generation, they practice Islam from the angle of, I will look at the different deeds, whichever of them I feel like is going to impact my life negatively in a heavy way, I will agree that this is a bad thing to do. Okay? So what if it's not very clear to you that this deed heavily, negatively impacts your life? And he says, not a problem. No problem. Why? Because I don't feel the impact. I don't feel like it changed things about me too much. So he was supposed to pray Fajr. He didn't get up for Fajr. He doesn't care. He doesn't feel like he's a bad person. He didn't hurt anyone. He wasn't harsh with anybody. He didn't do any of these things. Because he's going based off of how he feels. He didn't feel like this was a problem. Now, if you go to Quran and Hadith say, no, what you did was one of the worst things you could possibly do. You took God's command lightly. You did istighfaf to Salaat. You didn't take it seriously. Yes, for someone who doesn't even prepare. Now, sometimes you prepare and you don't wake up. No, this is a person who doesn't even prepare. From his feeling, he feels like it's not a big deal. Quran and Hadith says, no, it's a really big deal. See the dichotomy, the contradiction between these two? This is the role of Quran and Hadith. Quran and Hadith are there to tell you that this deed that seems insignificant, in reality, it has a very big impact on your soul. He comes home, he yells at his wife. He doesn't feel like it's a big thing. The kid comes, yes, he yells at the kid because the kid's not listening, which is pretty much why we call kids kids, yes? That's part of the reason why they're called children. If they did everything you told them, it would be called an adult, yes? Okay, so he is harsh with the child, and he feels like it's not a big deal. Muharram is coming around, and I'm going to attend the majalis and so on and so forth. And Islam says, no, your heart is polluted. Your heart is polluted. You need to clean up. But he doesn't care because he goes based off of whatever he understands. He says, I yelled at my family, but I went to the majlis too. So everything's fine. And Quran and Hadith tell him, no, not everything is not fine. So the Quran, the narrations are telling us what? This argument you're having, it pollutes your heart. This is number one. We'll move on to number two. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Number two, this one is from the sixth Imam. He says, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْخُصُومَ فَإِنَّهَا تَشْغَلُ الْقُلُوبَ وَتُورِثُ النِّفَاقَ وَتُكْسِبُ الذَّغَائِنَ. When you get into these arguments, you know what you walk away with? You walk away with grudges. You walk away feeling like this person hates you. And that person feels the same way about you as well. It removes the love and the affection and the friendship that you had in your hearts towards each other. This one seems pretty clear to us. Number three says the third problem is, listen, if you become like this, إِذَاءُ النَّاسِ وَسُوءِ مَجْلِسِهِ, no one wants to be around you. No one wants to spend time with a person who always has an answer for everything you tell them. But it's like this. It says, oh yeah, but this is what I think about that. And you say, yes, I understand your perspective, but your answer doesn't apply here for this reason. And he says, yes, but the but never ends. He always has something to come back to you with. Always something that apparently you don't know and he knows. He says, وَسُوءِ مَجْلِسِهِ. This person, no one wants to be around this person. Yes? I've unfortunately been in the position, and I'm sure the shuyukh have had this experience too, where you will see marriages will fall apart. Lives will be altered. The future of children will be impacted because this husband or wife always has something to say back. It doesn't end. This one puts the dishes this way in the dishwasher. That one puts the dishes the other way in the dishwasher. So at one point they have to say, okay, we have to agree to disagree. But no, one of them, he or she wants to go on. She has something to always, or him. This is a problem. Lives fall apart like this. He says, number four, the next thing that happens is that every time you have a discussion, it's all about defeating the other person. وَإِظْهَارِ عِلْمِهِ, and you want to show off what you know. That's your main point in the discussion. Sometimes it's about religious things, sometimes no, it's about basic things in life. Yes? It's interesting. This is the lives that we live. You look at our scholars, and inshallah this will be the final points that I mentioned in this first khutbah. You look at the lives of our scholars, it's very different. You know, these guys who were mountains of knowledge, yes, Allama Tabatabai, they asked them one day, they said, what's your day look like? What does our day look like? Oh, we wake up and then we have breakfast, and by the time we get to actually getting work done, it's 2-3 hours later, and then, you know, before you know it, it's dhuhr, got to take a break for that, obviously. And then, you know, you come back in the afternoon, and it's a typical day. They say, well, how does your day work? He said, nothing, I wake up, yes, I have something, and then I go, I sit, I open the Quran, because of course his masterpiece was his tafsir, although he did a lot more than that. He says, I open the Quran and I sit and I start, you know, dissecting verses and I think about it. And I think, and I think, and I think, until it comes to a point where I'm tired, I need to take a nap. So I take a nap and then I get up again and I start reading again. That's my day. The day consisted of literally studying the Quran the whole day. Now, of course, there were other things in there, but this is how he was spending his day. Okay, these guys who were mountains of knowledge, one of his students says this. It's a very interesting story that he narrates. He says one day, he was in town, Ayatollah Khomeini was in town too. And so these are both scholars who are known for different aspects, but known specifically for their knowledge of Islamic philosophy. You know, philosophy sounds interesting. Anyone who wants to sound smart, but who do they talk about? Talk about philosophy. Yes? So, said I wanted to get these two in one room, and I wanted to have a discussion going amongst them. So I invited them both to lunch. So they accepted, except I didn't tell them what my plan was. My plan was, once I get them into one room, this guy's written books and lectures and all that on Islamic philosophy. This guy, the same thing. If I get them into one room and I throw one matter of dispute out there, they'll jump at it, and I'm sure they're going to be going at it. This is how it's going to work. So he says, I brought the lunch. I didn't tell them why I had invited them. He said, I brought the lunch. They started eating from the food. Then as they were eating, I snuck in my question. And I said, yes, by the way, this philosophical matter, different scholars have different opinions about this issue. Allama Tabatabai, what is your opinion on this issue? Please enlighten us. Now, if it was you and me, we'd say, yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Fulan Fulan. Yes, I'll begin my lecture now. Yes, that would be me. Yes? So, he said, Allama Tabatabai, if you can please shed light on this issue, share your opinion on this issue. Yes? He said, all of a sudden I saw he's not paying much attention. He continued eating his food. He said, Aghay Khomeini's here. He can talk about that. He continued eating his lunch. So I said, no. You're not going to get off the hook just like that. So I turned to Ayatollah Khomeini. I said, well, Aghay Khomeini, what's your opinion about this? Seems like Allama Tabatabai wants you to share your opinion. Why don't you go ahead? And he said, yeah, different scholars have different opinion about this issue. But, Aghay Tabatabai can share his opinion on this if he wants. The student says, I sat there 10, 15 minutes trying to get these guys into an argument, something. I mean, you have a lot of knowledge. This is the part where you're supposed to impress people. This is the part where you go out there and you say, there's 54 opinions on this issue. Yes? He says, the whole lunch I sat there to try to get these guys to start arguing with each other. Do some mira. Let me see some of that arguing. Let me see that shouting match. I couldn't. I walked away. I gave away a free lunch. Yes. I walked away. But now you would think these are people who don't know much. No, they wrote books on these topics as well as other topics. But this is the humility that they carry. Now, if they ever felt like it was their duty to speak, they would speak. But if they felt like it's not the place, no problem. Yes? This Allama Tabatabai was something special, His students always said when he used to answer questions, he used to answer with a quiet voice. Yes? But when he didn't know the answer to something, he would say, I don't know, out loud. So everyone could hear him saying, I don't know. These are the legends. These are the role models that we have. And then you look at my life and our lives, then you see something else. All of a sudden, which way we put the toilet paper in the house is going to take over the whole evening, and it's going to ruin the whole evening. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He removes this habit of mira and jadal from our hearts, inshaAllah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين أثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا ثم أصلي وأسلم على نجيبه وجليله وحافظ سره الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأراضين بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد اللهم صل وسلم على علي أمير المؤمنين وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في أرضك صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات Ibadallah, usikum wa nafsi bitaqwallah. We begin the second khutbah by reminding all of you and myself to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We were discussing the tafsir of Surah Al-Waqi'ah, and we touched on a very important point as it relates to why the Quran sometimes goes into all of these details that sometimes from our perspective is not too critical, it's not too important for us to know. And yet the Quran describes in detail some of the things that are going to happen on the Day of Judgment and some of the things that will take place in heaven. The conversations that people will have with each other. As they are headed towards the Day of Judgment, the Quran will tell you in detail. Some of them at least. The conversations that people have in heaven together. The conversations that people have, God forbid, in hellfire together. The Quran will describe for us in detail some of these conversations. And we said the reason why the Quran goes into all of this detail is to take this abstract reality that you have never seen up until now and you won't see until you leave this world, to make it into a lived reality for the human being. This is what the Quran does. So the Quran doesn't turn around and just say, listen, if you're good, you're going to end up in heaven. The Quran says, when you come, then there's going to be these seats that people sit, and you're going to be facing this other person, and then you're going to be drinking this type of a drink, and then this type of food is going to be brought to you, because this becomes a reality in your life. Especially if you have uns with the Quran. Especially if you're acquainted with the Quran. Unfortunately, and this is not the main point I want to make, I want to move on. Unfortunately, in our communities and in the Muslim community in general, Shia and Sunni have this problem. And that is, we are mostly concerned with finishing the Quran. We're typically never concerned with understanding what this Quran is even saying. That's usually not our concern. Ramadan comes around, people say, I want to finish the Quran. Okay, great. But are you going to understand what the Quran is saying? No. But if I finish the Quran, it has this much thawab. It has a lot of thawab. But now you have to understand the Quran too. You have to understand what it's saying. Why? Because sometimes one verse can change your perspective on life altogether. That's the power of the Quran. Poetry doesn't have this power. These things don't have this power, yes? The words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this power. Sometimes one verse can put life into perspective for you in such a way that it changes your perspective on life altogether. So the Quran goes into these details to make this a real reality in our lives. It says, إِذَا رُجَّتِ الْأَرْضُ رَجَّةً. When the Day of Judgment begins, the earth starts to shake. What a shaking! وَبُسَّتِ الْجِبَالُ بَسًّا. And the mountains start to shatter. What a shattering. فَكَانَتْ هَبَاءً مُنْبَثًّا. And when these mountains are shattered, they turn into dusts. It's like they don't exist anymore. And we said the earth and the mountains, they are icons of stability in our lives. And these are the two the Quran says they're not going to be around on that day. They will shatter and shake in front of your eyes. Meaning everything is changing on this day. Nothing is the way it used to be. Okay, so when all of this is happening, ya Allah, it seems frightening. It seems like there's chaos. It seems like everyone's just running around. Sometimes you see movies, yes? Maybe on social media, they say this is what the Day of Judgment is going to look like. Everyone is running around, so on and so forth. The Quran says, listen, on that day, you know what the only thing that matters? Only thing that matters is which of these three categories you fall under. That's the only thing they care about on that day. وَكُنْتُمْ أَزْوَاجًا ثَلَاثًا. We have three groups. And the Quran seems to suggest that every human being that has ever lived and is living and that will live in the future will fall under one of these three groups, at least eventually. Every human being. Because the Quran does this categorization multiple times, yes? In multiple surahs, the Quran has this categorization. Imma this wa imma this. You're either this or you're this. So even the people we see around us, yes? The non-Muslims and other people, average people that we see around us, yes? It seems as though the Quran is suggesting at the end of the day, they are also going to fall into one of these buckets or these categories or one of these groups. وَكُنْتُمْ أَزْوَاجًا ثَلَاثًا. Okay, great. So what are these three groups? It says so. There's three groups. فَأَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ مَا أَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ. There are the guys who will reach salvation, happiness. put it into our terminology, they're going to have a great time. But let me tell you, this is what the Quran is saying, فَأَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ مَا أَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ. What a people. That's what the Quran is saying. What a people. What a life they are going to have. Yes. We gave the example the other time. Yes. You have a meal. When it's really good, say, what a meal. Yes. I had a burger, but what a burger. Yes. The Quran says, فَأَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ مَا أَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ. If I could just tell you about them. Okay. وَأَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ مَا أَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ. And the people who are going towards perishing, they're going to be miserable. مَا أَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ. Their situation is going to be really bad. وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ. And then there are these guys, they're also good people, but because they're so amazing, we're going to make a separate category for them. They are the ones who rush towards us. Ashabul Maymana is you and I. Yes, Ashabul Maymana is the guy who's like, he's okay. As-Sabiqun is the one who rushed. So, when it was time for Salaat, there were some people, they said, we have 5 hours left. What's the big deal? I'll pray 2 hours from now, 3 hours from now. And they told him, they say, no, time of fadila and your reward and all that kind of stuff. Say, yeah, it's okay. But it's halal to pray later anyways. Yes, Shaykh? I said, yes. And he says, okay, no problem. We'll pray in 2-3 hours. And inshallah, this person will make it into Ashabul Maymana. And then there are Sabiqun, they rush. They say, the Quran says, Sabiquna ila al-khayrat. When good is brought to them, there's an opportunity, they jump on it. This is a different category. Okay, so the Quran is saying, and this is the main point I want to make inshallah in this khutbah. The Quran is saying, listen, on that day, we only have 3 categories. In this world, this life that we live, how many categories do we have? 1 million different categories. Because when we're in this world, you identify in 1 million different ways. Sometimes you identify with your last name. Sometimes you identify with your class in society. Sometimes you identify with your career. You say, I'm Maulana. This one says, I'm a lawyer. This one says, I'm a doctor. Okay? Sometimes you identify with your ethnicity. I'm Iranian, I'm Arab, I'm American, I'm Canadian, I'm this, I'm that. Sometimes you identify with where you stand in society. I'm rich, I'm not so rich, I'm average, I'm middle class, whatever the case might be. There are 1 million ways you identify in this world. The Quran says, listen, when the day of judgment comes, all of that goes out the window. None of that matters anymore. Except for that portion of those identities that you used to build this identity. You were a lawyer? Okay. So you helped people? You did a good job? Yes? You went out of your way to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Okay. So that identity of being a lawyer helps you here because you built this identity through that identity. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. You were the doctor? Okay, so you went out of your way to serve my servants, and you did it in a proper way, and so on. Okay, so because you use that identity to build this one, okay, we'll take it into consideration, and it counts for you. But no, I was just a doctor, good life, not a bad person either, just a doctor. So, okay, great. But that was for over there. Over here, there's a new world order. You don't identify in that way anymore. So you show up and say, okay, so where's the line for the Iranians? What do you mean Iranians? Where's the line for the Pakistanis? You say, no, there's no line for Pakistanis. Where's the line for this? They say, no, listen, we don't have these lines. We have other lines. We have the lines for those who used to worship God in Ramadan. Do you fall under that category? Bismillah. We have a line for that. We have a line for those who are Rajabiyun. They used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Rajab. Do you fall under that category? Bismillah. We have a line for those who used to sacrifice for other servants of God. We have a line for that. We have a line for those who are truthful. These are narrations. They say heaven has multiple gates, yes? Well, every gate is for a different characteristic. There are different lines over there, but not the lines we're used to over here. So the Quran tells us all these identities that you had, they are all gone. The identity that matters today is these 3. وَكُنْتُمْ أَزْوَاجًا ثَلَاثًا. How much did you obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's really the only thing that is going to matter for us on that day. And you'll see this in the most beautiful way, brothers and sisters, when someone passes away. And someone passes away, and we bring the body to do Salat al-Mayyit. Yes? This Salat al-Mayyit that the Imam will turn around and tell you, you are to recite all the lines on your own behalf. Yes, the Imam doesn't recite any of those lines on behalf of others. Every person has to do his own. So there's 5 takbirs, yes? First takbir, you say the shahadatain, and the second one, and the third one. After the fourth one, you're going to actually talk about this mayyit. You're going to refer to this mayyit because you're going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, forgive him, increase him in his goodness, so on and so forth. This is what you're going to do. Okay, so in Salatul Mayyit, when the life of this person has come to an end, everything is all set and done, how do you identify this person? How do you refer to this person? Do you say, oh Allah, we have in front of you Muhammad, the son of Ali? Is that what you say? That's not what you say. Do you say, oh Allah, we have in front of you the son of a lawyer? That's not what you say. Say, oh Allah, we have in front of you a very famous person. That's not what you say. You say, Allahumma inna hadha al-musajja quddamana, this body that's lying in front of us, this is how we're going to identify him. Abduka wa abnu abdika wa amatik. He's a servant who was also the son of another servant and another female servant. What happened to all those identities and oh, I was this and I was that, and they go out the window. They don't matter unless they are tied to this identity. Unless they are tied to how much of a servant of God I was. Then yes, those identities then matter. Then yes, this person was wealthy, but he took from his wealth and he gave it to other people. Even though shaitan was whispering in his ears, "Ash-shaytanu ya'idukumul faqra wal fahsha." Shaitan was whispering in his ears that if you give away your wealth, you'll become poor. Shaitan was whispering this in his ear, but he took advantage of that identity to build this identity. Now yes, it matters. Otherwise, all these other identities go out the window. We are standing there, and the only categorization that matters, وَكُنْتُمْ أَزْوَاجًا ثَلَاثًا. You are 3 groups. And there are multiple other points to understand from these verses that we are going through. Inshallah, that we will leave for the following weeks. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that of these 3 groups, at least we make it into, if we can't make it into as-sabiqun, I'm kind of a done deal already, so I don't think I'm going to pray for that for myself. Inshallah, you guys can make it into as-sabiqun as-sabiqun. If not, at least ashabul maymanati, because even them, ma ashabul maymana. What a wonderful life they are going to have. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He places us in one of these 2 groups, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه. اللهم صل على محمد. Thank you. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. ما صلى على محمد وعلى محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. ما صلى على وأن عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب. يا محسن قد أتاك المسيء أنت المحسن وأنا المسيء فتجاوز عن قبيح ما عندنا بجميل ما عندك يا كريم. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما. قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله العظيم الحليم. لا إله إلا الله رب العرش الكريم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل إثم. اللهم لا تدع لي ذنبا إلا غفرته، ولا هما إلا فرجته، ولا سقما إلا شفيته، ولا عيبا إلا سترته، ولا رزقا إلا بسطته، ولا خوفا إلا آمنته، ولا سوءا إلا صرفته، ولا حاجة هي لك رضا ولي فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين رب العالمين. صلوات.
Mu'mineen, a few announcements regarding upcoming programs and events, inshallah. As we begin to look towards the upcoming month of Muharram, City of Knowledge will be holding its annual Ashrai Majalis here in English at CFK. We are honored to have Sheikh Amin Rastani as the speaker for this year's Ashrai Majalis. The programs are scheduled to begin at 6:45 p.m. and end with Salaat al-Maghribain and to-go niyaz. We will also be having 2 private majalis during this Ashra. The first being a Urdu majlis hosted by Brother Sultan Rizvi at 7:30 in the morning with Maulana Mudassar Shah Musavi. The second being Farsi majalis with Sheikh Amin Rastani immediately after the English speech and Salatul Maghribain. Event details will be sent out tonight via our WhatsApp and our email. Here at CFK, we aim to serve the community while being responsible with your donations, as it is your contribution that enables us to bring you great speakers and keep our doors open. We also do not do any fundraising between programs. Sponsorship slots are available online. We request that you contribute as you can and become part of Azadari Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal farajahu. A few other announcements. The registration for Islamic Academy is now open for the fall 23 semester. Spots are limited. Please register as soon as possible. All information regarding fee and the fall calendar can be found at the link tinyurl.com/CFKIA registration 23. We also have a blood drive happening here at CFK, driven by Who is Hussein, Texas. July 26th, we will be having 2 blood drawing buses outside in the parking lot. Whoever's interested, please register and show up. As always, event details for the events that I've spoken about and all the upcoming events are posted on our webpage, cfkdfw.org, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and to our WhatsApp group, where all the details are shared as well. Jazakallah to all our sustaining members, donors, volunteers, and program sponsors for your contributions. For opportunities to donate, sponsor programs, or help behind the scenes, please speak to myself or any of the existing volunteers. Let us now please recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of today's program sponsors, especially Marhuma Sherbanu Ashiq Ali, daughter of Wazir Ali Poonawala. Let us please all include our own marhumeen and the marhumeen of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه محمد وعلى محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه محمد وعلى محمد وأن عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه صلاة العصر الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقوم. سبحان الله. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام، وأسأله أن يتوب علي توبة عبد ذليل خاضع فقير بائس مسكين مستكين مستجير، لا يملك لنفسه نفعا ولا ضرا ولا موتا ولا حياة ولا نشورا. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من نفس لا تشبع، ومن قلب لا يخشع، ومن علم لا ينفع، ومن صلاة لا ترفع، ومن دعاء لا يسمع. اللهم إني أسألك اليسر بعد العسر، والفرج بعد الكرب، والرخاء بعد الشدة. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. صلوات.